Hello there, and welcome back to J Painting. I am JJ, and yes, we're back at long last. After over a month's hiatus, we are finally back, creating some new content. Yeah! A lot has happened. Obviously, things are starting to open up again. Well, I say starting, they've been open for a little while now in the UK, so my time has been more limited. I've not been able to make as many videos as I wanted, and to be honest, I was okay taking a little step back, because doing 2 videos a week, it's tiring. It's really tiring, along with everything else I had going on anyway, so I needed some time, I needed to rest. I am finally back to myself, new month, new me, I suppose, but you know, that'll do, that's what we're going with. And I have had a lot of stuff to do, but I've also learnt a few things. So I've been playing quite a bit of 40k in this time as well. It's been quite fun. I'm also now, a bit of an announcement for everyone, I'm now an Element affiliate, hooray. So if you go to my link below, you can check out my code and my link to Element if you want to help support Josh, support Element. I like to think that I'm quite nice, but Element are absolutely wonderful. They've always been absolutely fantastic and delightful, so definitely support them as much as you possibly can. But anyway, today's video, as you can tell from the title, is all about the Death Guard, everyone's favourite Chaos Marines. Unless you're playing against them, as I've come to realise from playing Death Guard for the last couple of months. So, one of the interesting things about Death Guard is that one of the things that catches people out about them is they don't know that much about them. We all know about the high toughness, we all know about the strong characters, we all know they've got their own psychic powers, blah blah blah, but we don't know much about the nuances or what makes the Death Guard powerful, what gives them that edge, what gives them that strength, what makes them so difficult to fight. And there are the obvious things, like I say, but there's a lot more to it, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. For today's model, we're going to be painting something from the Death Guard Codex. This model, in fact. Yes, indeed. This lovely model right here. So, without further ado, let's crack on! When we come to talking about Death Guard, it's probably worth starting this video reminding everyone that they are actually a very new army, and really haven't actually been around for that long. Yes, Chaos Space Marines have been around since 2nd edition, and the legions that represent them have been around for a while, but Death Guard as a standalone army is still very new. And even though we've got a concept of what Nurgle armies do, we don't actually have the same in terms of what a Death Guard army does. But today we're going to dive into all of that. So the first thing to say about the Death Guard Codex is there are a few things that people consider think they know about Death Guard. So from the past, and what's definitely carried over, is the idea of everything being a high toughness, so toughness 5 starting point, and everything working around that basically. And that is true, everything in the Death Guard Codex is very high toughness. But when you think about what else there is, that's where people start to struggle. The disgusting resilience special rule they got in this edition was an enormous step forward for them, and has become something that has defined them in a lot of ways, especially since they are now the only Space Marines out there who aren't worried about damage to weapons, whereas every other Space Marine out there is now very much worried about damage to weapons. But that's not to say that they have every advantage over every Space Marine. The thing about the Death Guard Codex from a overall perspective is that whilst it is a very tough codex, it's also quite a deep codex with a lot in it. And when I mean deep codex, unlike the Space Marine Codex, which is very broad and has lots of different units, but ultimately lots of those units do very similar things, such as intercessors, infiltrators, and incursors, all being different units, but they've all effectively got the same weapons, Death Guard have a much deeper unit selection and customization in some of their units. So the basic Plague Marine unit, for example, has a much greater variety of weapons on its own and for each model than any of the other Space Marine troop units do. And this is partly to make up for the fact that ultimately Death Guard don't have that many infantry units either. They only actually have 5 core units, which are the 2 different Terminator units, Plague Marines, Hellbrutes, and Possessed. And you've got to remember that of those, only 4 of them are infantry, and only 1 of them has OBSEC. So the Death Guard Codex overall is not coming at gameplay from the same place that other Space Marine Codexes are, or indeed even Chaos Marines are. And there's a bit of a preconception when it comes to thinking about Chaos Marines that they're always going to play the same as Space Marines. And even though you could argue that the Chaos Marine Codex has been somewhat weakened over the years because it's constantly being treated like it's the Space Marine Codex, but with more spikes, that this would be the same with the Death Guard. But thankfully, the Death Guard have made a very big departure from that and have really forged their own identity. And this brings me on to the first thing that Death Guard have that you don't really see anywhere else, and that is demon engines. But not big demon engines, they have demon engines at multiple sizes. Yes, they have the Defiler that every Chaos Marine Codex has, but they've also got things like the Plague Burst Crawler, an artillery tank that Space Marines don't really have that many of in the grand scheme of things outside of the Whirlwind. There's also the smaller ones such as the Blight Hauler and the Bloat Drone that are both fast attack options and have heavy weapons on them. And that's another thing to bear in mind. Death Guard's heavier weapons and longer range weapons aren't on infantry units at all. In fact, nothing that the Death Guard have outside of the Reaper autocannon on the Terminators has a range greater than 24. So this means that Death Guard's armies overall are limited when it comes to their infantry being able to attack past a certain range, as that's exclusively the domain of vehicles. And this is the thing about Death Guard that I've come to learn and I want to share. Death Guard are an inherently aggressive army. Yes, they've got cannon fodder in the form of Poxwalkers that can soak up a lot of damage, and yes, if played defensively, they can do very well. But ultimately, because of the lack of range and the relative lack of mobility in some respects, they aren't an army that can afford to sit still. They have to be moving forward inexorably, inevitably, as the tagline would go, and almost on brand in many ways, but that's what they have to do in order to get anywhere. They can't sit in their deployment zone with a few units being sent out to grab objectives the same way that armies such as Drukhari, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Space Marines all very easily can. It's a case of everything goes forward or everything stays still, but you can't really start dividing it hither and thither and sending individual units out. And there's something else that Death Guard have that is very much missed by a lot of people, and that is the fact that their characters are very different to that of how other characters operate in other armies. So yes, whilst you have your perverted captains, your diseased apothecaries, and your plague-ridden sorcerers, who all look very similar and act similar to things in the Space Marine Codex, and in some respects the Chaos Marine Codex, you've also got characters that don't fit into any of those categories. Where does the Foul Blightspawn fit? Where does the Biologus Putrefier fit? The thing that both of those two do is offer... The things that they do are actually far more reliant on your army as a whole. So while the Foul Blightspawn has a wonderful Plague Sprayer, which is probably one of the most dangerous flamers to be held by something that isn't a tank, the Biologus Putrefier is someone who walks around giving out mortal wound buffs to the entire army. And the thing about Death Guard is that that's the other thing to remember. They can be buffed further, and indeed a lot of their characters and special powers are centered around buffing them even further. So whilst a standard unit of Plague Marines can be very dangerous, and their equipment makes them even more so, they can be pushed even further. But ultimately this is all to do with the fact that they are quite limited. There aren't that many of them overall, and they don't have that many options. So the options they do have to seem like they're very, very powerful in order to have any chance of doing well on the battlefield. So just to quickly summarise, Death Guard, Chaos Marines and Space Marines are sometimes all seen as very similar in a lot of ways, but Death Guard have made the biggest departure from that entire way of thinking, and most people's thinking and imagination of Death Guard hasn't caught up with that and understood that they are that different. They are far more limited in some respects as a codex, so as a result the options they do have are things that have to be empowered to an enormously high level. And as I said in my Black Templars video a little while ago, when you're known for doing something well, that shouldn't be the only thing you can do. And Death Guard have a lot of versatility. They are fantastic in combat, they have lots of very powerful and very interesting ranged weapons, and they have some very dangerous psychic powers. And whilst they may not be the fastest army in the world, they do have fast things in their fast attacks. That's why they're there. The Bloat Drones and the Blight Haulers give them speed, and in the case of the Bloat Drones, give them some verticality because they can fly, and obviously puts some of their heavy weapons even faster and gives them a bit of an edge in that respect. So all this put together gives you the sense of going, well, how do you then deal with that? How do you then counter even half of what I've said if you're playing against them? Well, the first thing to bear in mind is that just because they reduce damage doesn't necessarily mean that they can stop it altogether. And you have to remember that, yes, damage 2 weapons aren't that dangerous to Death Guard because they go down to damage 1. Weight of fire is always going to be your best bet. Flamers, heavy flamers, the purifying flamers from the Munistorum, and the Incendium cannons from the Invicta Warsuit are all fantastic examples for having a lot of shots that can get to you, along with weapons that have more than 5 shots on their base profile. So whilst those weapons may not always be immediately obvious, the second you're putting more than 4 or 5 shots into a unit of Plague Marines, you're going to have more of a chance of knocking them down. The other thing you have to remember is that because Death Guard are slow, but because they will be moving generally towards you, you have to find ways to outmaneuver them, getting behind them, getting around them, not just standing in front of them. Yes, you can get to an objective before them probably, and they will be shambling forward the entire time, but they're only dangerous if they catch you. And that 24-inch max range that their infantry have when it comes to ranged weapons mean that they will always be quite limited in what the infantry will be shooting at you. So it's only really the tanks you have to worry about when it comes to longer range weapons. And if you can get to them quickly and stop them shooting, then you're going to have a much better time dealing with the rest of the army. And then the last point, probably the most important point I'd say when it comes to dealing with Death Guard, is you need to be able to take out the characters. Death Guard have an ability to run a larger than average number of characters, and ultimately that's more rewarding. So yes, the Space Marine Codex has a lot of characters, the Judicars, the Apothecaries, the Company Champions, etc. And whilst they are all very good, they don't really have the same punch or the same buffing ability that Death Guard characters have overall. And because every Death Guard model can have the Contagions of Nurgle ability, as well as any other buffs they have, it does mean that they are not only always buffing themselves, but they're always debuffing you, so they are getting stronger whilst you're getting weaker. So it's good to remove as many of those debuffs as possible and very quickly get yourself into a position where they aren't able to make the most out of their character special abilities, and if you can kill those psychers quickly, then it is always worth doing that. And how does that practically manifest from army to army? Well, for one thing, Astra Militarum naturally have weight of fire, as technically do armies such as Custodes if played right. So with that on its own, that is quite a good way to stop them. Drukhari and Adeptus Mechanicus also can do this as well, but both of them having speed is an important thing. More so for Drukhari, who should be able to run rings around Death Guard and never get into combat with them, just as Adeptus Mechanicus have heavier units they can put in front of Death Guard to mitigate their inexorable advance and hold them up long enough to keep whittling them down so they're more manageable for the backline. Space Marines are one which struggle with Death Guard, I've seen quite a lot, but that's largely because Space Marines treat Death Guard like they're Chaos Marines rather than treating them like they're Death Guard. That is to say, slow and inexorable, and ever so slightly more limited, but ultimately very powerful with the weapons they do choose to bring. And last of all, if you're playing things such as Eldar, or Necrons, or Tyranids, or Orcs, or Sisters of Battle, you do still have some very powerful special weapons and some special abilities unique to your armies. Orcs, for example, have sheer weight of fire that will probably bring down Death Guard quite quickly if they are used properly. Tau and Necrons equally have weight of firepower, and because they're weapons and having lots of weapons that are damage 1 but have 8 or 9 shots, that's your strength in dealing with Death Guard. And last of all, Tyranids, because of the swarm mentality and their ability to hold units up for a very long time, by weight of attacks in combat, you can quite easily stop Death Guard if you can overpower them in combat. And thanks to your speed and your very, very large number of Psychers, you can do quite a lot to mitigate their number of psychic output when it comes to Death Guard. So overall, if you want to know how to beat Death Guard, the things you have to bear in mind is, if they do bring something, that's probably going to be far more powerful than what you're expecting it to be. Don't assume that just because they are tough, everything is going to be slow, and just because it may reduce damage doesn't mean it's not worth shooting at them either. And the last most important thing about Death Guard is just because they do have a lot of high toughness units and they have a lot of characters, doesn't mean they're unkillable. The best way to take them on, as always, is focus fire, bring them down one at a time, whittle them down, do exactly what they would do normally, grind down. But Death Guard can grind down on an industrial level, but you're going to have to take them down one by one. But ultimately, given time and some patience, being patient with Death Guard is a very important thing, it should work. But anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think of the Death Guard? Do you think they're overpowered? Do you think they're unkillable? Do you think they're unstoppable? Or do you think they're balanced? Do you think they are just as powerful as they need to be? Let me know your thoughts. I look forward to hearing from you. So, that's hopefully going to help all of you guys out there when it comes to playing against the Death Guard, even if you want to start collecting Death Guard maybe, and just how to deal with them, both for and against. That's just what I said, but hey ho, I'm that thorough saying everything twice. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think in the comments below. And whilst you're down there, you know, subscribe, like, all that good YouTube shilly stuff. There will now be one video a week going forward, because I've only got time to make one video a week, but I promise you there will be at least one video every week. And also, whilst you're down there, check out my Patreon link if you want to support this channel, as well as my website, see what else I do, my Element affiliate link now as well, which is pretty cool, and my eBay stuff, and also my Instagram if you just want to see some pictures of toy soldiers. But again, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. Goodbye, and have a lovely day.